ahead here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the State of the Industry presentation brought to you by Industrial Fabrics Association International. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's webinar. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing them into the questions box of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. I will collect these and they will be addressed during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. A PDF copy of today's presentation is currently available for download under the Handouts tab on your control panel. A link to the download will also be emailed to you later this week. Now I would like to introduce today's presenter, IFAI's Director of Market Research, Jeff Rasmussen. Jeff has 20 years of market research experience, and his expertise include areas of customer satisfaction studies, customer market research studies, as well as industry and competitor analysis. He is also a frequent speaker on textile markets at industry events, including past Advanced Textile Conference and the 2018 Smart Fabric Summit, Washington, D.C. Jeff also authors IFAI's annual report on the state of the specialty fabrics industry. Please welcome Jeff.
Good morning, everybody, and I'm thrilled to be able to share some information with you this morning. All the work that we do, and we do this work year-round, and it comes to a culmination in events like this. So thank you for attending. What we're going to do is cover the markets. I'm just going to give you a general sense of how this is going to go. I'm going to cover the markets that IFAI serves, and then some of the drivers in the U.S. specialty fabrics industry that have helped grow and support the industry. And then we'll give a peek at the worldwide and the U.S. market size and growth rates. And then I'll give you an overview of the various markets that we serve here at IFAI. Now, we've got approximately 1,600 member companies, and it's worldwide. And I've got a list of the segments that we serve. We've got awnings and canopies, marine, and then we have fabric graphics and fabric structures. We have tent rental and manufacturing, tarpaulins, and along with that we group in truck covers and advanced textile products, the military division, and then we have a geosynthetics division, a narrow fabrics, and then equipment. Now I have as listed as 12th is makers, and this is a division where we emphasize workforce for manufacturers and product people in particular, sewing and manufacturing skills and training and so forth. And it won't be too long that we're going to also be having videos with online access on sewing. It's not out right now, but it is coming soon. Now, just to talk real quick on kind of the size in terms of the number of companies in the U.S. specialty fabrics industry. There are about 7,200 or so that are in this, and about 78% or 80% of them are suppliers. You see 1,600 suppliers, and there's a variety of them: fibers, folks, yarn companies, materials, distributors, and so forth. And we have about 5,600 in-product fabricators of products using finished materials. And these are primarily very small businesses. And you'll see that when we cover the various segments, we make mention of that. Some of the things are developments that have been driving this U.S. Specialty fabrics industry. Well, just a few months ago, I had pegged, after doing some studying and research, the sales in the U.S. specialty fabrics grew about 2.6% in 2017, and with GDP expected to be about 2.8% this year, possibly 2.9%. We're expecting 2.7% growth this year in the specialty fabrics industry. We also expect consumer demand to continue its pickup and moderate pickup in 2018. In 2017, consumer spending was about 2.8%, and we're expecting right around 2.6 or so this year. The other thing that's really helping the industry is the unemployment rate. In 2017, it was 4.4%, which was good. Well, this year, we've got a couple of things looking at. The range that we project is about 3.6 to 3.7%. And as of the end of May, the average so far this year in 2018 is 4%, but it's gotten better in April when it was 3.9 and in 3.8 in May. So it's starting to drive towards that, and that's really going to be helpful, and it already has been. Consumer confidence. This is important, particularly in the marine industry, because there's a real linkage that has been shown between that and sales. Now, generally, consumer confidence index of 90 means that there's going to be increased consumer spending. Well, in 2016, we had almost 100. And then last year, it hit a record. It was 120 and a half. And so far this year, through the end of May, it's at a really high number, 127. So this is great. Other things that help buttress what I was just saying here is taking a look at our GDP in 2016, 1.5%, really low, tough time. It came back though in 2017 at around 2.3%. And like I said, with the spending in 2018, we're expecting GDP to be around 2.8, potentially 2.9%. Another thing that has evolved that is helping, and I've talked to a lot of companies at our expos each year, and this one is really was a subject of discussion. The U.S. tax reform bill that was passed by Congress in December of 2017 and was signed by President Trump. What this does is for corporations, it lowers their corporate tax rate, and it was at 35%, and this is all the way down to 21% now. So that's a 40% drop, which has helped them to make more commitments to purchasing capital, which hopefully it can help invest and grow their business. One of the things that's been hard or tough on some of the businesses, in particular the geosynthetics arena, is the oil price increases. We had about an increase, this is West Texas Intermediate, which is what's usually followed for the United States. That was about 17% in 2017. Now, as of now here in June, it's at about a 27% increase, but it's also projected by the Energy Information Commission to go up to potentially by 40%. So this is going to be tough in terms of that occurring for raw materials. Import pressures are also a source of pressure, particularly for U.S. manufacturers and Canadian manufacturers. And a lot of that we get, the bulk of it anyway, we get from the likes of China. In fact, for years now, China is represented, as far as industrial textiles or technical textiles, represented on the import end of things about 40, the high 40% range, or it's been up as high as 50% of the imports that come in. So they're a real source for that. But, internally in their country, they, in the 90s, in the past, they've had GDP up in the 10% range. Well, now they're down to 6.9% in 2017 and expect it to be a little lower this year at 6.6%. So these are all things that are having influence on the market. One of the things that was kind of exciting over the last couple years, I would say, April of 2016, this kind of all started, but it was in development before then, was in the smart fabrics market. Massachusetts, there was Institute of Technology, was chosen to lead. They were chosen to lead a consortium, and the name of that consortium is the Advanced Functional Fabrics of America. The acronym is AFOA. And this was announced on April 1st of 2016 by then Secretary of Defense Ash Carter. And it included, just to give you an idea of who's in this, was like 89 universities at that time, and then we have manufacturers. We even have nonprofits, and we even have state level organizations that are all in this. Now, on top of that, this FOA consortium also won a bidding process in 2016, at about this time in 2016, April. And this was to lead a series of institutes being set up by the Obama administration. And this particular one was called the Revolutionary Fibers and Textiles Manufacturing Innovation Institute. And they were leading that in conjunction with the Department of Defense. Now, this institute was the 8th manufacturing institute or hub that was awarded by the Obama administration. And these institutes were a vision that the Obama administration formulated. And what they were trying to do is develop a national network for manufacturing innovation in the United States. And the reason for this is we've had our Achilles heel being clipped, by the likes of China and others, of course. And the purpose of the institute was to better position the U.S., particularly in the as a world leader in manufacturing, to combat the competition from other global players. Now, the FOA and the Department of Defense Institute, the agreement that they came together on, what this did was the Department of Defense allocated $75 million to the institute, and then another $250 million came in from non-federal investments. So we had a total of some, $317 million. It was set up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Now, it took about a year. It was like June of 2017 when the headquarters was finally officially set up. But why is this a big deal? Well, what it does is there's a very number of partners involved in this that are traditionally don't work together, the electronics market and the textile market. So it brings them together. It does a better job of helping solidify that. It brings together fiber manufacturers, yarn folks, in the electronics arena, IC or integrated circuits. You'll have solar cells. And why is that important? Is to better develop capabilities to create advanced functional fabrics that can communicate, they can store energy, they can monitor a person's health, and so forth. So this was a really big deal. Now, just to let you know, we had a conference, a Smart Fabric Summit in April of 2016 at the Commerce Department to help talk about this and grow this area of interest. Well, we did it again this time in April of 2018, and same thing. So, in other words, the ball hasn't gotten dropped. There is momentum building here, and there is some excitement in driving a very new and fast-growing area in the textile world. Now, I'm going to talk this slide on the worldwide sales and growth rates for specialty fabrics, and then the next slide will give you a view of the U.S. And what you're seeing here this is a 5-year trend from left to right. You can see 2014, we had about $135.7 billion. And you can see in 2017, it's about $146.5 billion. And so the growth rate's been ranging between 2.5% in 2014, and now in 17 it was about 2.7%. And this year we think it'll be about 2.8. And the U.S. has a very similar pattern that you saw in the worldwide sales and growth rates, because it's a big chunk of that. It's about a quarter of it. And it too is about roughly around $30 billion in 2014, and about almost $35 billion that we're projecting for 2018. Had about 34 almost in 2017. And you can see the growth rates have come up, because back in the time of 2014 and 15, we were kind of stuck GDP-wise in the low 2% range, and that's kind of where the U.S. was in that. But now that we're picking up, you can see us in 2017 anyway, and in 2018 where it's coming up, it's encroaching on the 3% range. The U.S. military market. Now I'm going to be talking about some of the individual segments that we serve. Now this is the military clothing and the textile market has been down and flat over the last few years, at least between 2014 and 2016. And when you look on the right here, you can kind of see what I'm talking about a little bit. And this is the spend by the Defense Logistics Agency, which is in charge of getting the material, purchasing the materials for the military folk, for U.S. military. And so we had about 1.6 billion. The spend was in 2014, and it was really kind of down in 2016 at 1.5 billion. And then, so you can see it's kind of crawling there. It hasn't exploded off. I mean, it's not over 2 billion or anything. One of the things that has held that in check is sequestration, the capping of the Pentagon spending on military. And this was part of, back in 2011, there was a Budget Control Act that was passed by Congress, and that was to cap spending, in particular, on by the military. And this has been a grave concern for the Defense Logistics Agency for a while now, since then. Well, in February of this year, the Trump administration proposed a defense budget of $716 billion for fiscal 2019. And the other thing that's been really helpful going forward here is that the spending caps that we just talked about, Congress lifted those for the next 2 years. So the original budget for 2018 military was $639 billion. Well, we could be reaching $700 billion. And also, the thing that the administration, the Trump administration, is there's been a refocus because we've had a drawdown in Afghanistan and Iraq, the Iraq War ending in 2011. There's been a shifting of spending towards addressing the threat of Russia and China. Sure, we had the conflicts. We still have the ISIS conflicts. A year ago, we were helping the Iraq military defeat ISIS, who are still holding the city of Mosul in Iraq. So we did that. And then we still have the threat of the Taliban and so forth in Afghanistan, and the North Korean missile program, where I think it's fairly well known there's been a fair amount of testing of nuclear weapons by them. But just this past June, on the 12th, President Trump and Kim Jong-un had a summit, and the result of that was that Kim promised to the U.S. that they would dismantle their nuclear arsenal, and Trump promised that they would cease or stop military exercises on the Korean Peninsula. And we'll see how that goes. I mean, this just happened. I don't know how that's going to play going forward, but so that's military. Here's a more traditional market, and this is the U.S. and Canadian awnings and canopies market. And these are fabricators who, in the United States, who specialize in awnings, because a lot of folks say only do awnings, but they'll do marine, and they'll be in other things. But this is for just specializing in awnings. And most of these organizations are small. They're 2 to 10 employees. And over half of their awnings use solution-dyed acrylic. One of the things, a trend that has really evolved over the last since 3-4 years or so, is awnings for fabric. Right now it's about 80%, but it used to be higher. And the inroads that were being made were from metal manufactured awnings, and that's now about 18%. It used to be, 10, 11%. Now, the growth rate in 2017 was about 2%, which actually has been an improvement, because it's been in the past we've seen like 1.5%. So it's going in the right direction. Some of the things that help bumping this is the home values have been going up. They were up 6% in 2017, and about 4% this year we're seeing. More housing starts. They were up in 3% in 2017, but 2018 is quite a bit more, a little over 10%. So we're looking at this year about 2.5% growth in the awning market. Part of this is stemming from growth in recovers. As you see these awnings, they just replace the fabric and keep the frame. The other thing that's really a big deal in the awning market is the weather. The better the weather is at the start of the spring and lasting into, say, September into the fall, it extends the selling season for folks. This has been helpful in the last few years. Now, the marine fabric or marine boating market, and these are also mostly small shops. In fact, they have less than 5 employees often. There are approximately 12 million registered boats in America, and about a little over 80% of them are power boats. And the prices have been going up, particularly in the last few years. And most of these boats are all made in the U.S. In fact, 95% of them are small, and they are made here in the U.S. So new unit boat sales increased about 6%. This is one of the higher growth rate areas of all the markets that we serve. Marine tends to do very well, and this was in 2017. Their pre-owned boat sales were up about just a little over 2% in 2016, up to about 9.2 billion in 2016, and we see this for this year coming in maybe at 2.4% increase, and so it'd be about maybe 9.4, 9.5 billion. So it's nice. It's going in an upward direction. And again, the growth in recovers for pre-owned boats is big. So the marine fabric itself, the boats are increasing around 6%. The marine fabric market has also been growing around 6% in 2017. And we see the same occurring this year in 2018 as far as growth, 6%. Again, some of the things that have helped support this is our growth in consumer spending, the GDP, increasing to a level of almost 3%, 2.8%, the low unemployment below 4%, and the consumer confidence, because it's a real barometer for this particular market. If this is up, usually then the marine market is doing well. And we expect about a 2.6 increase in consumer spending, which is something I mentioned a few slides ago. Now I'm going to talk about U.S. and Canadian tent rental and manufacturing market. The growth in here is doing real well. It's usually been around 3-4%, 4% growth in that market, but now in the tent manufacturing market, this is up about 5%. This is like the anchor industries of our world, and we expect 4% growth this year. Now, the predominant fabrics used in this market, 70% of it's vinyl laminated polyester, and about 25% is vinyl coated polyester. And then getting into the events part of the market, tent rental market, in 2017, the party events market grew about 6%. And usually this market's been in anywhere from 6 to 9% growth. And we're expecting the 6% growth again this year. Some of the growth that's curtailed past growth and has kept it in kind of around 6% is stemming from the corporate market, the corporate events market. Now, this has gotten better, but after the recession had happened in 2009, it used to be in the past before that they would spend more extravagantly expenses holding events for the corporation, but they clamped down after that recession, and it's taking a while, but it's starting to come back to getting back to pre-2009 levels. One of the things that's really been helped growing in the last couple of years is the growth of clear span tents. Now, another thing that we look at every year, we look at a special events magazine that does a survey, and in January or February of each year, they publish it. And they survey, one of the things that was intriguing that we found that came out of that was in 30% of the independent event professionals that they surveyed said the uncertain economy would be their greatest challenge in 2018. That's a big drop because the prior year in 2017, 55% of them said that would be the economy would be their biggest challenge, the uncertainty of it. So it's gotten better. It's a 25-point differential there. The second and third biggest challenges with their customers, they're getting more and more demands for shorter lead times to get the projects done faster. And the competition is intense. So, then you've got cost cutting sometimes that goes on in the market. And then a little over half of the market of the independent event professionals said that they plan on staging more events than they did in 2017. So, the fabric graphics market. This market in 2017, the growth was up, about approximately 3% over 2016. And this is pretty decent growth when you looked at the GDP was only about 2.3%, so they're above that. We project, because we see a healthier 2018 for the entire market, we project growth rate around 4% over 2017. And like I say, a lot of this, using the 2.8% U.S. GDP growth figure that I talked about earlier. Digital graphic applications. Now this grew about 15% in 2017, which is interesting. You don't see it on this chart here, but I would say about a handful of years ago, that was 10%, that figure. So it's really come up, the digital graphics application growth. Dye sub-transfer is, the top or leading imaging process. And then you have solvent and then latex. Now, markets that are real growth ones have been trade show. And just to digress here a little bit, this is a chart that shows the percentage share of U.S. and Canadian fabric graphic market sales. You see trade show graphics, which I talked about here, up to 17%. Well, again, a handful of years ago, that was more around 10, 11%. And another thing that's been growing is point of purchase signage or soft signage. Soft signage has had double-digit growth in some areas. More inexpensive, but we still are. This is an age-old problem. It's been with us a long time. The inexpensive imports from Asia overall, but in particular China. Just to talk about this chart that I pointed out just a second ago, the leading market, though, as far as market sales by market segment, was the outdoor science and banners, and that's about a quarter of it, 26%. And again, I mentioned that 17% was for trade show graphics. And then we have the indoor signs and banners, and that's about 12%. And flags has been traditionally around 11%. And then the POP signs or point of purchase signs is 9% and so forth. And then decor textiles. Now the 21% that you see under other, this is things like awnings or green banners. It could be stadium wraps that we see every time it seems that we have the Olympics, summer games in particular. Okay, now I'm moving on to the fabric structures market, the U.S. and Canadian fabric structures market. And when we talk about this, we're talking about temporary or permanent large structures that incorporate specialty fabrics as the key building component, and they're tension membrane structures. One of the things that's helped this is the improving economy, particularly this year. Is an increase. There's been an increase in demand for designed or engineered structures, and which are helping to replace a lot of the olding or very aging structures that we see going on. In the building market, the second bullet I point that out because it shows that the building market is, even in the residential remodeling market, that's seeing nice demand. And that's between, since 2014. We're also getting more and more and more temporary structures. These can be for warehouses, it can be for commercial buildings, it can be for school playgrounds that they put up to help protect children against getting skin cancer. The growth in 2017 was up about 4% in this market. And it's going to be 4% again in 2018 as we see it. And the predominant fabrics in this market are PVC, coated polyester, and then you have high-density polyethylene. And with these fabrics, one of the things that's happening is that they're lasting longer. The quality of the fabric has been better. So there's greater durability, and along with that, longer life. with the color. They're retaining the color longer, which is a real problem sometimes in very hot climates where the sun will fade with the exposure to the sun. Now I'm getting into the U.S. and Canadian. Now this is the truck cover market. The slide that will be following this will be talking about the tarpaulin market. But I've separated them out so you can kind of see some of the differences. Now we're talking about the truck cover market. We're talking about lumber and steel being used or transported on flatboard trailer trucks. Also roll-up tarps on dirt trucks or dump trucks. Now the truck cover use last year in 17 and this year, freight demand has been really tight. It's been up because of the construction market. And there's more lumber. We're seeing more lumber tarps. We're seeing also for steel and dump truck tarps. Not only that, the tarp systems have been really increasing. And to point that out or to highlight that out, back in 1990, it was about 10. Automated systems were about 10% of the market. Now they're over half. And the principal fabrics used here in the truck cover markets is the vinyl coated polyester and nylon. That's almost 2/3 at 65%. Then we have the vinyl coated mesh, and then mesh in and of itself, which again, this is an area, the mesh fabrics have really improved, and they're about 27% of the market. The growth rate has been about 5% in 2017, and again this year. One of the things that's interesting about this market is there always seems to be a part of it or a portion of it where companies will, trying to save money, will go off who they usually been buying their quality tarps from or truck covers, and they will try to buy inexpensive imports, say from China or Korea. And I've talked to a lot of these folks here and there at our expos. They end up doing, within a few years, they come back to the quality because it's so much more worth it because it lasts. And one of the things that they are making also money towards it in the tarp is the tarp repair business. For some of them, this is a real big deal as far as a portion of their revenue. It can be up to 25% of their business. Now, I talked about the tarp systems earlier. I just wanted to give you a kind of a sense of how the breakout is on those. Up front here, we've got the roll-away systems. And then if you're driving on a highway, you can often see the side kits or the curtain sides on trucks. So that's about 20% of the market. And then we have lumber and steel, and then machinery covers for construction. Custom tarps then, about 15% of the market, and slideaways are about 5%. Now, the U.S. and Canadian tarpaulin market is a variety of these. You've got the hay tarps. Try to get the hay tarps over here. Poly tarps, which are very common and heavily used in the construction market. And then, of course, you have baseball tarps. And then in agriculture, now this is a nursery that you see here, but it drives home the point. The fabric consumption or sales growth here is about 5%, and we think that that's going to repeat itself this year. And one of the things that's helped buttressing this growth is almost a 4% growth in the U.S. construction market last year. So far through April of this year, U.S. construction is almost 6.5% or 6.6%. So this really helps the construction market, the lumber and poly mesh and so forth. The predominant fabrics here is almost half of them are polyethylene and coated polyethylene. And then we have 25% is vinyl laminated and coated polyester and nylon. And then mesh is about 20% of the market. The geosynthetics market. This is a really interesting market. It includes a variety of subsegments. This is geotextiles. These are probably the two biggest: geotextiles and geomembranes, drainage portion, the geogrids, clay liners, and erosion control. Now, the geotextiles market, a little over 90% of that market is polypropylene, and this is the largest market in the United States, Canada, in terms of volume. Over 760 million square yards. Geomembranes, this is high density linear as well as low density polyethylene in PVC. This is the largest market in the U.S. in terms of value. It's close to around 1.5 billion right now. And then you have about a core set of 40 to 50 manufacturing companies in the U.S. and Canada. Now, the growth rate in the past has been anywhere from 4 to 6% on this. We're down to about 2% we had in 2017, and we bumped up to around 3% that we expect this year, 2018. Some of the things that have affected this growth, and I have this in here in our developments area, is we're receiving more and more competition in the last few years from imports, inexpensive imports. Kind of a common resounding theme that the entire market seems to be incurring. But this has also affected deeply the geosynthetics market. The other thing, and I talked about it in a much earlier slide, is the rising cost of raw materials. There's been a significant challenge because of this for manufacturers and geosynthetic manufacturers, and it's resulted in some consolidation. For example, in 2017, the Montreal-based Solmax, which is a leader in polyethylene geomembranes, they acquired GSE Environmental out of Houston. North Carolina-based Haynes Geocomponents, they purchased Toronto-based Terrafix in January of 2017. And then Raven Industries out of South Dakota, they acquired most of the assets of Colorado Lighting International, who's out of Parker, Colorado. So this has been a big effect on them, and some of them have gone out of business as a consequence of it. One of the things that's been on the positive end of things is a couple years ago, 2.5 years ago, in December of 2015, President Obama signed a 5-year, $305 billion U.S. highway bill, and it was called Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, or the FAST Act. This was really important because I know we watched this for a long time. For 10 years, we didn't have a long-term national transportation ban. They kept amending it each year based on the previous, year or the original agreement. But now we have this long-term national transportation spending package, and it includes geosynthetics that is incorporated in that package. So more and more geosynthetics are being used in transportation projects. Also, a year later, in December of 2016, President Obama signed a Water Infrastructure Improvement Act, and it's called the Water Infrastructure Improvements for the Nation Act, WIN. And what it does, because it badly needed, is to address some of the needs of our water infrastructure, our harbors, our dams, and flood protection infrastructures. Also embodied within that act, it incorporated a study on the performance of innovative materials, and those innovative materials is the geosynthetic materials market. And hopefully sometime this year, the results of that study will be reported to Congress by the Secretary of the U.S. Army. So these are some positive things that are going to help push our growth. Now I'm getting into the advanced textile products. This was a division that we created to kind of catch some of the various markets and pull them together that we deemed as more advanced. So we created a definition, if you will, and it's called the advanced textile products are those that have textile fabric that is designed or engineered to reduce the damage of a threat or a hazard, say bulletproof vests to protect soldiers, or suits, biochemical suits to protect against biological or chemical agents, and so forth, or they're designed or engineered to meet another specific advanced performance demand. One of the ones that I'm putting up here on this slide, and this is one that we're pretty familiar with. We've been dealing with this at IFAI for years now, is the U.S. safety and protective market. And as you can see in the segments, we've got cut and slash, and most of this is gloves, but it's got it's got high visibility. But this is the biggest market. It's about 3.4 billion. And then we have thermal, and and this is both high and low temperatures. And the high temperature would be an example of that would be Nomax from DuPont. It's in the lining of the turnout coats for firefighters, and it creates a separation between up to 250 degrees between the source of the fire and the skin of the firefighter to give them that protection and relief from that. And then we have the chemical or CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, is about 750 million. And then ballistic and body armor at about 730 million. And then you have other category, which is a couple hundred million. All told, it's close to $6 billion. We have 5.93 billion. And this market traditionally does grow. It's really followed this pattern, and it's about 6% growth last year, and again this year. Narrow fabrics. This is an interesting market because we did a study on this back in around 2012, 2013 here at IFAI. And these are textiles that aren't more than a foot or 12 inches in width. And they're woven, they're knitted, they're braided fibers or yarns. They usually have an edge so that they don't unravel. And overall, this year, because in the past, the growth has been 2.5%. Now, 2017 was about 3% growth. And we're seeing this again this year. One of the things that's helped this market is in the wearable medical electronics or smart fabrics market. Say you're monitoring your heart rate and your breathing rate, so something to measure your biophysical metrics. They've often been held up by straps, which would come from the narrow fabrics market. We're going to see how this goes going forward, just because now they're coming out with smart fabric shirts where the sensors are woven right into the shirt, so they don't need a strap maybe to hold the device that's measuring, say, your biological metrics. But we'll see where that goes going forward. There are about 150 narrow fabric companies in the United States and about 500 globally. The U.S. and Canadian companies in the narrow fabrics market tend to be small. They have generally less than 50 employees, and they have less than $10 million in sales per year. One of the things that I jumped over while I was going through this, I just wanted to touch on it. In 2012, 2013, in our study that we did on the narrow fabrics market, there were 5 key segments. Automotive, which was principally seat belts. Now, and then we had military, safety, transportation, and medical. And I'll talk to each of these a little bit individually. Now, the seatbelt market, the light vehicle sales in 2016 were about 17.5 million light vehicles. And in 2017, they were about 17.1. So the growth has dropped down a little bit, but that's a lot. So there's a lot of volume in that market. The military market, it grew about $1.7 billion, for 2017. So that was up about 13%. Usually that military market grows a lot lower than that. It's usually more like 4 or 5 or maybe 6%. But that was an exception. The safety market, and this is harnesses like for fall control, could be arbiters, could be mountain climbers and so forth, utility workers, to protect them from falling. And that's about a 4% growth in the U.S. And transportation, those are things like slings and tie downs, and that's been growing, and it's still at around 3% growth. One that's really doing a good job of growth is in the medical market. Of course, you have baby boomers as well, that are helping drive this market. There's about 76 million of those folks. So orthopedic braces, things for wound care like gauze or bandages, and that market's been growing at around 5%. Now the equipment market, very interesting market. They have been growing the last few years, 17 and now this year at about 2%. In the main segment that you have here, you can see in this chart, you have as far as the market served by equipment manufacturers, these are the biggest to the smallest markets as a percent of sales that they serve. And 18% is tarpaulins, truck covers, 17% being awnings, and then you have 14% on tents. And then you have the middle position, filtration and signs, and then rounding out the bottom here, 9% each are things like geomembranes, geotextiles, or the inflatables. One of the things that comes up with the equipment folks or the manufacturers or providers, suppliers to their markets is that in our markets we've got a lot of separate markets, and what they wish is that they had greater. They would like to be able to sell more to each market. In other words, they've expressed this as I've talked to them over the years, more depth. So that's one of their frustrations going forward. But so that's part of their challenge, and because when we look at the 2% growth, some of the things that they feel that have held that back a little bit. But it's also in the past, GDP has been in the low 2% range also. So with GDP getting better now this year at 2.8% potentially, or maybe even higher, maybe it will finally break that 3% range. This will help not only the overall market, but it will help folks like the equipment people. I talked about the 2009 recession and some of the adaptations that suppliers and end product manufacturers have had to make as a consequence of that. And so the last, 9-10 years, even though the economy at times has been slow, their belief, and this is what's made them some of the leaders in their respective industries, is to keep spending on one thing in mind: innovation. Known some that they try to innovate new products. 24% of their product base, they want them to be new products within the last 2 years. So they believe that, okay, we're going to invest in this. We're not going to try to just predict the future. We're going to try to embrace this and create the future, not only for us, but for the industry. And they focused on controlling costs, things like lean manufacturing and Six Sigma. They take a hard look at their supply chain and their logistics within that, so they can be closer to the customers and closer to their vendors, and make it easier for their customers to purchase from them. Obviously, they look at their administration costs. They've got things that really, really, in particular, fabric structures market has done a good job on this. Is educating or upgrading their workforce, training them. Focusing on innovation, on product development, trying to look towards maybe as much as they can, creating more high value in their products. So they're raising the bar on existing products and new products also, and their service standards. If they're going to expand their organization, they want to make sure they're looking at things that are going to help them grow, but also complement well their core competencies, so they don't stray too far from what they're really good at. They try to work closely, like I said earlier, with their vendors and customers, so they do a better job of anticipating their needs. The new equipment investment. Now, as a result, and I mentioned this earlier, the tax reform bill that was passed in December of 2017, lowering their corporate tax rates. One of the things that for some players in our industry, it's allowed them to invest more in equipment. And so then they're more efficient, and so their cost curves have been lowered. So getting their costs down, and they're becoming, and it's also reinforcing that mantra of being an innovator, and it's helping them to achieve that. And it's also helping them to break into markets, or at least have a play in some of these high value markets, like our advanced textiles that I mentioned. Might be medical, might be geo, might be digital graphics. It depends. But as long as it, like I say, plays well into their core competencies as an organization. Well, thank you very much. That's my wrap on that. And I guess if we're going to look at questions, be happy to try to answer some of those.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. We do have a few questions. One is that in addition to the growth rates, do you have annual revenue of the individual markets?
Yes, we do. Good question. I knew that was gonna come up. And the reason I say that is we have, for the revenue for the individual markets, and so forth, but it's in a fee-based, report, specialty fabrics report that we put out, and it's on our, website. It can be purchased. For non-members, it's of IFAI, it's $499, and for members, it's $199. It's about a 21 page report, and it goes in depth, on some of that. For each of the individual markets I just talking about, it spends about a page or 2 pages on each one, and the size of the markets are mentioned in there.
Okay, so the next question that we do have is that on the fabric structures page, there was photos that showed the shade sail structure, but it wasn't specifically mentioned in the presentation. Any thoughts on that market?
Well, shade is becoming it's becoming a huge deal, and it's part of the growth, especially in the warmer climates and so forth. In fact, for fabric structures, I think anyway, it's in the past, the fabric structures have been around 2-3% growth, and now we're seeing a little better growth for them. It wasn't just the training of the employees, but these kinds of structures that are starting to more and more, we're starting to see. And there's a variety of things that they're used for. Auto dealerships even have them for for their inventory that's on the parking lot of an auto dealership. These structures are often used for larger, it might be weddings. Of course, tents do this too. Festivals and so forth. We're seeing them in stadiums are incorporating them. Sporting events, tennis, events like that. So there's a variety of places where these things are occurring more and more and more.
Okay, and then we do have another question on whether if this report can be purchased. This report can be purchased in the upcoming weeks on our e-store, so more to follow with that. Again, if you do have any other questions, feel free to enter them in now. Also, too, if you think of questions after our presentation, please reach out to us. You can find our contact information on our website under Contact Us. So I'll give it a few more seconds to see if there are any other questions. So please type them in now if you do have some. All right, well, it looks like there are no more questions for today. Again, a PDF of today's content will be emailed to you. Thanks again, Jeff, and thank you all for attending.